practice. So give a second for everyone to settle in. All right. So again, this is geo-distributed development teams in practice. Before we get started, just a quick rundown of the glossary. Geo-distributed means not all in one place. Telecommuting usually refers to working from a location other than the office that you are assigned to. Remoting is slang for telecommuting. Working from home is an expression used either to mean telecommuting and remoting all the time, or if you're a person who usually works out of an office, you will say you're working from home if you're taking a day and working from your home. And digital nomad is a category of people who telecommute that travel the world and work from wherever they find themselves at the moment. So quick intro about me. I've been dabbling with computers since I was very young. At around 13, this is circa 98, I discovered you could develop for the web. This is a new thing, and I never looked back. It probably happened in this building. So my intro to remote work was in college. I teamed up with a designer friend because I suck at design, and all my stuff looked horrible. And we ran a web studio for about 10 years, just shy of 10 years. And we had about a dozen. We had dozens of successful projects and happy clients, but we mostly worked from our homes. It looked like a company. We had a company. We had really big clients, but for the most part, we each did our work at our respective homes, and we only met up in person to brainstorm, discuss specific issues that we came upon, and the occasional work session when we were like sprinting to finish up a deliverable or something like that. I stumbled into real remote. I took a real job during the web studio that my buddy and I ran. The work was sporadic. It didn't really have a steady pay. So I took a real job at a real company at an office in Zagreb. And the real job turned out to be outsourcing to a foreign company. I worked for a British company based out of London, but also with offices in Belfast. And it was a unique experience because nobody else in that office, it was an office about 30 people. Nobody else in that office did the same thing that I did, worked for the same people that I did, and most of the time, my interactions with my coworkers were limited to like just random banter. Didn't have anything to do with work. And I realized that nobody in that office really cared when I showed up or if I showed up. As long as the people in the UK were happy and paying their bills, I got my salary and nobody asked me anything. So one particularly rainy morning, I just couldn't be bothered going into work. I'm not an early morning person, and just seeing the rain pouring outside, thinking about getting into my car, driving into the city, finding parking, not failing to find parking, ditching the car somewhere double parked or whatever, just really did not appeal to me. So I stayed at home and I worked from home. I was working from my personal laptop anyway because the computer that the company gave me was not great. And I preferred to lug my laptop into work every single day. And so that means that I already had everything that I needed to do the job. I had my laptop at home. I didn't rely on any resources in the office. We didn't really get there was no free lunch at the office or anything like that. So I stayed at home, and I didn't even tell them. I worked from home. This was before video chat was a common thing for outsourced work or for remote work. So I just did my audio Skype calls from home, and nobody knew. And then I went back into the office, and then a few days later, like the next week, again, it wasn't even raining anymore. I just couldn't be bothered going to work. So I stayed at home again. And then after about 3 or 4 times, I really liked it. And one day I was like, hey, listen, so I've been taking like the occasional work from home day. I don't even remember which expression I used for it. I didn't know that that was a thing, that was like that working from home was an expression. So I just said, like, I've been not going into the office every single day, but like, you're happy with my work because the we do the morning check-in call. We agree on what I'll be working on, and then we do the afternoon checkout call, and then I present what I did. And you didn't notice, right? And they said, no, we didn't notice. And I said, is it cool if I do that more often? And then they said, yeah, sure, it's fine. So I never went into the office again. It was just, I tried it for a week, and then a week just turned into forever. Um, and then, uh, and then summer came along, and I was like, I have a beach house. Um, I wanna go work from the beach. So I did, and I didn't tell them again. It was not very smart. But they didn't notice. They didn't care. So at the next summer, I was like, so last summer I kind of worked from the coast for about a month or three. Is that okay? Did you notice? Did you care? And they were like, no, we don't care. So I did it. I did it again. This time I told them I'm going, and everything went, fine. I had decent internet there. I did solid work there, and I found a rhythm where I could take a quick swim between two like work sessions. Like instead of a lunch break, I did a swim break, and it was great. So at this point today, I've been working remotely and hiring remote workers for over 10 years, almost exclusively remotely. I had a brief stint of about 6 months where I don't know, I hit my head or something and took an office job. I can't imagine going back. I've been approached by recruiters with jobs in Zagreb, jobs in different cities, different countries, and every time it's like, yeah, it's an office job, it's a 9 to 5, and immediately I start shivering. I can't even imagine it. So I'm here to talk about like why you would even work remotely, what that means, what that brings. And I consider it a completely different approach to work from the usual office paradigm. And it's definitely not for everyone. It's it requires changes. It requires changes on both sides. It requires accommodations from the company, and it requires accommodations from you, from your life, from the people around you. However, if you can make it work, it has some really amazing upsides. First of all, no more commuting ever again. I don't know if you ever did the math, but a half-hour commute in one direction every day, every working day, means you spend 10 days a year stuck in traffic, like in a car, driving a car, in a bus, in a train, tram, whatever. If it's an hour-long commute, that means you spend more time commuting to and from work every year than you get vacation, probably. And if you work remotely, there are no more miserable rainy days or blizzards as long as you do your shopping on time. So also, people don't. A lot of people bring their food to work, but it's a huge hassle. I've always preferred to make food at home or have a better selection of eating out than what was available around my places of work. So I worked at a couple of places in an office where I was tied to that location, and I also do occasional on-sites. But I've always found the selection of food around any office to be worse than what's around my house or than what I can make at home. And I know a lot of people who move or choose where they're going to live based on proximity to work, based on like shortening the commute. So that's how bad the commuting is. This way, you can live like wherever you want, wherever you like, and not worry about the commute. There's also something called flex time. Flex time is short for flexible time. It implies the ability to do your work outside of fixed office hours. It often comes with the remote work territory, but not always. It's not applicable to all types of jobs. Like if your job is being around and immediately responding to anything, then flex time probably won't work. Like if you're in support or marketing, usually have a fixed hours for when you can do your job effectively. But for developers and designers and those kinds of jobs, you rarely take a piece of work on it and deliver it in the same day unless it's an emergency, and emergencies are usually something that anyone can pick up. So being able to have flex time depends on how the company is structured and what the workflows and processes are like. But it's something I enjoy, greatly. The downside is that it's a double-edged sword. It's very easy to end up working nonstop, just because there's no set time to start work and no set time to walk away from work. People fall into this pit of, oh, I'll work later, and then you're overtime, and then you have to make up for it, and you end up taking breaks to go shopping, taking breaks to go hang out with your kids or whatever, and then you end up just working nonstop. This happened to me for a brief period of time, or brief, I mean like 2 years. But sometimes like people just can't deal. People need to dress for work. They need to go to work and be at work to do work. Some people are just like that. Part of it is what you're used to. Like if that's the routine you've had since forever. If you got through college by getting up, going somewhere, and then studying there, and then started your job by getting up and going somewhere and working there. After 10 years, 15 years, 20 years of that, it's very difficult to get in the zone of, okay, now this is where I work. It's a corner of my kitchen, but this is where I work, so I'm going to sit down and I'm going to do work. It took a lot of time for me to find a mode in which I say this is where I work, and now I'm going to sit down and I'm going to work. It still takes me a bit too long to get into real hardcore work, but it's the same when I go into the office. So that's fine. Nobody is saying working from home is for everyone or that companies should abandon offices en masse. Like this is a type of work that sometimes works for some people doing some jobs in some companies. Some companies are different. Some companies just don't work unless everyone is there. So why I work remotely is it changed a lot over the years, but I've always loved working remotely. It started primarily because I really hated the commuting that I mentioned. I can't stand the thought of spending half an hour in a car. I don't really like public transit. And I just immediately start thinking of all of the things that I could be doing. I could be, sleeping. I could be watching a TV show. I could be hanging out with someone. I could be sitting at a computer and doing things. Just sitting in traffic is just a complete time sink. It started out definitely because of the commuting, but then I stumbled onto DeviantArt. DeviantArt is an interesting company. It was the first company of that sort for me. It was 100 people roughly in the company, and roughly half are in the Hollywood office called HQ. And roughly half of the company is remote. The engineering team is explicitly remote. There are no developers at HQ. This is on purpose so that they would not get interrupted with, hey, I need this, or like, hey, can you fix this? A side effect of hiring globally just kind of happened that out of 20, 30 people, no 2 developers were in the same city. For a long time. I think it changed at some point, probably after I left. And to this day, it's some of the best and most talented people I've ever worked with, and we built really, really amazing things there. Now, DeviantArt made it work by having regular meetups. So once a year, they would fly the entire company. So in a 100-person company, they would fly 50 people out to Los Angeles to hang out at the office for a week. Do some work, but also like every evening was like some sort of activity that was stimulating, like the team culture and so on. And also the developers would meet up roughly once a year, but so this was the everyone meetup was around the Christmas party around December. Developers would meet up around June, July, somewhere in the world. I was present for 2 of those. One was in the middle of nowhere outside of San Francisco, and the other one was in the literal middle of nowhere in France. And it was like 30, 40 people, just in the middle of France, some village next to some town you've never heard of next to Lyon. And that really helped a lot. And the company was just committed to doing it this way, which meant that even the people who worked at the office, who communicated with other teams in the office, used email. They used Skype. Skype was the big communication platform back then. And all of the work got tracked through tickets and so on. And as a result, you could miss a meeting and not really miss that much. You would come, you'd see like the conclusions, the work that was decided that would be done, and the whole setup really opened my eyes to fully remote companies. But at that point, I didn't really think that something like that was possible. Like, sure, I was one person working for a British company. The British company was what, 20, 30 people. I was the only person not in an office. I was like, yeah, okay, that works. But to have a fully distributed development team was an eye-opener for me. And I learned a lot about organizing work, about communication, about results-oriented work, instead of like setting some huge milestones and then expecting people to show up at the office for 8 to 9 hours a day and expecting to see the result at the end of the quarter. We broke down work into 2-week iterations, and every 2 weeks we would sit down. No, it was actually 1 week. I don't know. We would sit down like on Tuesday and say, okay, this is what's gonna happen in the next week or the next 2 weeks. And at that number of people, you really don't have any room to slack off. Like, as soon as your productivity dips, people notice. You start talking about it. You fix it. There's no danger of work not getting done. And a lot of the people appreciated it. A lot of people had small kids, had parents who needed attention, had some reason in their life that kept them living outside of a big city, kept them not looking for an office job, and everyone really, really liked the remote arrangement. So when I left DeviantArt, I was at DeviantArt for about 3 years. When I left DeviantArt, I co-founded a startup in New York, and it was immediately clear to me that we could not hire in New York. We didn't have the money. We weren't big enough. It was very difficult to attract good talent in a place like New York or San Francisco or any of like London, stuff like that. So we quickly scaled up to about 6 people in the Balkans region. So here. Croatia, Serbia, Macedonia. Exclusively all of the development for the first 1.5 years was done in this region, and we managed the company up in New York and pitched it and went looking for funds based out of New York, but all of the development happened here. We managed to make a kick-ass product. We met up in Amsterdam to set up the whole company, the project, the product. We met up at Berlin for a conference that was related to what we were doing. We met up in New York. The entire team met up in New York once or twice. We met up in Zagreb 2 or 3 times. But most of the work was over Skype and Hangouts. Those were the platforms of communication back then. Since then, Slack has kind of displaced both of them. And it's a much, much better product for this kind of work. But we made it work over Skype and Hangouts, and I was there for 2 years. We did some really, really solid stuff without ever having an office where people would come in and work 9 to 5 for longer periods of time. We made do with co-working spaces and so on, and it was fun. So how do you even get a remote job? Hold on. So it depends on your field, obviously. And companies are usually more open to hiring remote developers and support staff than like designers and product managers. This is just my experience, and I haven't found any hard rules, but that's just what I've seen from a dozen companies that I worked at. But really, the remote jobs and opportunities are everywhere when you start looking for them. I've had good success with job boards. I've had good success with meetups. I had great success with word of mouth. My last 3 jobs were just like me walking around telling people, hey, I'd like to work on this kind of thing. And then someone calls me 2 months later. It's like, I have that kind of thing. So if you're looking at job boards, what you'll find is that not all of them are built with remote work in mind. Some will have like a separate field in the UI that makes it clear that the job is open for remote positions. Some will have like, you can type in a location or you can leave it blank. Some jobs will be like targeted to a country, but not a specific city. But sometimes you'll just find a job post that says New York, or like LA or whatever. And then somewhere in the description, you will find like, we're okay with remote work, or we have a generous work from home policy or something like that. But the main lesson that I've found over the years is that even the ones that say nothing at all could be a remote position. Like it might be that they just never considered it. It might be that they considered it and were too scared to go into that. But it's something that if you come from a position of experience and like proven track record of that kind of work, you can get them to agree to it. I've also found some job postings that explicitly say no remote, please no, this position is in that location, blah, blah, blah. You should respect that. There's plenty of fish in the sea. They tried it. It doesn't work for them for some reason. And they're giving you a signal to not waste your time and their time. So you should just respect it. When it comes to interviewing, it can be like fully on site. It can be a phone screen and then they fly you out or like have you come out. It can be entirely over Skype. There are really no rules. A lot of the time, companies are just winging it. And this is not exclusive to remote hiring. A lot of the time, companies just don't know how to hire. They're just improvising on the spot. And for remote work, that's exactly what I've seen. As far as negotiating for compensation, this is one area where I see often people making mistakes. In my experience, you should be acting as if you're interviewing in that city, and it just so happens that you can do your work remotely and you do it from the other side of the planet. That should be your stance, and then they're all going to counter with something else. But I would not go like, okay, so all of my buddies make 1,000 somethings, and I'm going to say 1,200 or 1,500. Look at where the company is based. Find out how much someone like you would cost there, and then start at 80% of that. Because if they're talking to you, that means they can't do it where they are. And communication is a key bit of this. You have to be fluent. There's no way around it. Even if it's your native language, and you're applying, you want to live on an island somewhere, you want to live in the middle of nowhere, and you're applying for local work, but you want to be remote. Even if it's your native language, even if you're a shy, introverted person, confidence makes a big difference, because people will be skeptical about this arrangement if they don't have a bunch of experience on their end with it. They're gonna think like, I don't know, can we really not lose anything in the communication? It's your job to make them at ease with this. And if it's a foreign language, fluency and accent makes a huge difference. I've seen this firsthand. Same company, same people, just like one person is fluent, the other one has like a really, really thick Slavic or French accent or something like that. And it really affects how everyone treats you. No one's mean, but just like it puts people at ease. It's not, I wish it weren't so, but it is. Being fluent at a foreign language is a very, very difficult thing, because oftentimes if you're not living there, you don't really have opportunities to speak the language, to really polish it. my advice here would be to either find a native speaker that lives near you, or someone to speak with over Skype or whatever regularly. There's also like conversational courses where you can just sit down and talk with someone for an hour twice a week. This affects salary negotiations. I've also seen this firsthand, where people who are equally skilled, when you give them a chance to prove it, just can't really make the requests that other people can, just because they're not, like, fluency comes off directly as confidence. So how do you work remotely? There's no one true way, but here's how I do it. I know a bunch of people who work remotely. Everyone has a different setup. Communication is like key. It's number one. When you work at an office, you have all of these spontaneous ad hoc interactions with people. You meet someone on the way into the office. You're like, hey, how was your weekend? What did you do last night? Stuff like that. You meet people in the cafeteria while you're making coffee. You sit down with people for lunch. You need to recreate all of that through textual communication. It comes down to putting in a conscious effort to be visible, to be seen, to make sure that people in the company who are in an office know that you exist, know what you like, know what kind of sense of humor you have, what hobbies you have, stuff like that. I found that themed Slack channels help. So Slack is like a chat solution that has come up in the last couple of years as the market leader in team communication. What do I mean by themed Slack channels? If you're an animal person, if you're like cats, if you're like dogs, start a cats or dogs channel and invite people into it and start sharing random cat photos. If you like memes or whatever, drop a few in the random channel every once in a while. It's incredible how that helps you communicate with everyone equally, and you will form relationships with people in departments you otherwise wouldn't interact with. And it makes getting together for meetups or coming into the office once a quarter, it makes a huge difference. The other thing is over communicate and be reachable and responsive. My performance feedback regularly says, I have a feeling like he's just around like he's right here in the office, just on the other side, because he's more available than people who actually work from this office. What I usually do is I'll start earlier than the people in the office. I'll do a bit of work that is visible, send out a few emails, commit some code, something like that, and then go out for a long lunch, go grocery shopping, hang out with my daughter, spend a few hours outside, get my interactions with real people quota filled up, and then get back and then work through the end of the workday I work for a New York-based company currently. So start working around noon, put a bit of work in, leave for a long lunch, come back around 4 or 5, and then work for a bit more, leave for, I don't know, hang out with my wife, watch a TV show or something, and then come back and work until 1 a.m., whereas everyone at the office clocks out at midnight, which is 6 p.m. in New York. This way, I also score on my performance review saying, I don't know when this guy sleeps. When does this guy do anything else in his life? But the point is, I'm always online. I have my phone. I see notifications. I respond to emails when I see them over the weekend and so on. And it also makes a huge difference when people consider, should we hire more remote people? Yes, you should, because this guy's awesome. So another crucial aspect in how you work remotely is Workspace. Just because you don't travel to an office doesn't mean you don't need an office, especially if you don't live alone. When I was living alone, I was like, yeah, sure, I'll work from the couch, work from the kitchen table or whatever. At some point, you realize that you need something with a door that can be closed, and call it the office. That makes it easier to set boundaries and curb interruptions. When I was looking for my last apartment before my current, I explicitly said I want something that has a bedroom and then something that has a room, an additional room that can be like bare walls that I can turn into an office. And it greatly improved my work ethic, my performance, and everything. Just having a room that you step into triggers that, like, this is work, but also it's something that you're able to walk away from. When you say, okay, I'm done with the work, you leave the computer there, you step outside the room, you close the door, and work's there, and this is like your home. But if it's raining, you can still do it in your slippers. And equipment is something that is very important. I suggest investing in solid gear for your home office, and you will be glad you did. Sometimes a company that is fully remote or fully remote conscious or remote friendly or however you want to call it, they will offer you a budget for maintaining your home office, either a monthly or a yearly budget to get the latest gear, stuff like that. Sometimes they won't. Sometimes they'll say, it's your problem. You don't have that many expenses. You should sort it out yourself. By equipment, I mean a solid desk, something that doesn't wobble when you're sitting down at it. A good chair that you can sit in for hours and not end up with a broken spine. A big monitor too, or whatever you need for work. And very importantly, a good webcam and a good microphone. I recently invested in a Blue Yeti microphone that they sometimes use for like podcasts and stuff, and it's incredible what a difference it made, because it's something you think like it's something that happens on the other side. Like it doesn't affect me. I can speak into a headphone mic, but it helps with communication. People hear you more clearly. There's less like, what was that? Could you repeat that? And so on. And also, since I got a small kid, it helped to be able to speak softer, not have to speak so loud. So why do companies hire remote? And this is like slowly shifting into the other side of the other perspective, but this is still like, if you want to work remotely, you need to be aware why companies even hire remotely. Number one is cheaper labor. There's really no getting around that. Most of the time, you can find cheaper labor if you're happy to look elsewhere. Wherever you are, you can probably find cheaper labor somewhere else. Number two is they can't hire locally. The market near the office is too competitive. They don't have the finances. Whatever. Like in New York, it is almost impossible to actually hire a tech person unless you're Google, Facebook, or something like that. And number three is they want the best talent wherever they are. This specifically was DeviantArt. DeviantArt was, I don't care where you are. We want the best people across the entire globe, and we'll just make it work. My advice would be to stay away from number one and be cautious about number two, and the good experiences are at number three. Working for the companies that are the first group is just, they're gonna constantly be comparing your requests with what they perceive to be the cost of someone working from an office in Zagreb. That is not a fair comparison, because a person working from an office in Zagreb gets free health insurance, gets free. It's in the price of their salary. They get a computer to work from. If that computer dies, it's someone else's problem. The electricity that they spend for the computer, for the fridge that keeps the drinks and the food cold, that stuff is covered by the company, and so on and so on. And also you have sick days that are covered by the health insurance, the national health insurance, and stuff like that. So it's not a fair comparison. The second group is they could easily be number one or number three. It's just that their circumstances that they can't hire locally. So it's something to watch out for. And I found that local job boards, wherever people in your city post jobs, if you see jobs for remote positions there, more often than not, it's the number one group. It's someone who specifically says, "Hey, we're an American company. What's a good country to hire people that isn't India? Let's go with Croatia. Sure, that's closer in the time zones. Let's do that." They're going to probably be going for cheaper labor. So. On the other side, if you are trying to hire remotely, this applies if you're running your own company, if you're in charge of hiring at a big company, but it also applies if you're working somewhere and you want to bring someone on board, and you're frustrated because that person doesn't exist at the company, and they say, "Sure, go hire someone for like 500 somethings," and that's just not a budget you can hire someone locally for. You can pitch hiring remote people in a company where you don't control hiring. So if budget is the number one reason, use a local job board. You're going to find people who have no experience working remotely and will need to invest time into grooming them into high quality remote workers. Local jobs offer a kind of security remote jobs can't compete with. Like I said, it's a perceived security. I don't agree that it actually exists, but it's something that a lot of people feel. And you're going to need to offer those people some incentive to come work for this crazy company out of God knows where who wants to hire them to sit at home and do their job. People with experience in remote work usually expect an above average pay. They've realized that they're now competing at the global market, and they're not going to come in for 20% over what they could get near where they live. Beyond that, I would say hire as you would normally. Perceived need for higher confidence in people that you bring in remotely is fake. It does not exist. Someone could burn your entire life down sitting right next to you, either on purpose or unintentionally. There are people who are just not good, who are just bad actors. There are people, the majority of people are not that. Guarding against that by filtering out people who aren't physically near you is wrong. It's something that I've experienced a lot. It's something that I've seen in a lot of companies where they're like, how do you know that they're doing work? And it's like, you give them work and you tell them when you want it by. If they don't deliver it, thank you, bye. There's no benefit to like hovering over people's shoulders and like expecting them to magically work while you're there and then dreading that they're not doing work when you walk away. Set it up so it's very clear if they're doing work or if they're not, and that's it. Just let them work. So if you're hiring a few, there's no change in hiring process. Just do a quick phone call and then bring them out for an interview and do an interview like you normally would. That also helps assuage fears of hiring remote, because people, like, you meet the person, you're like, okay, this guy's a psycho or this guy's normal. If you're hiring a bunch, it makes sense to invest in a better phone screen procedure. If you're hiring for a different time zone, expect people to take a certain dose of flex time, and this is fine. Give them goals and deadlines and demand results. Who cares when they did it? So, one question I get a lot is, how does the hybrid setup work? How do you have half a company that is remote, half a company who is in an office or two? It can work, but the entire company needs to be on board. Like, everyone in the company needs to understand that there's a half of a company that is not present in the office, that don't hear you when you scream out, "I need this," or whatever. The communication needs to be written instead of spoken, and instead of impromptu in-person discussions, like just grabbing someone on the hallway. Meetings should be scheduled, taking into account phone or video calls. So you need to book a room that has the capability to do a video call or a phone call, or you need to like just make sure that you can call that person. The implementation of this can be slow and painful. I've seen companies try to go remote and just choke on it because they underestimated what it means. But in my experience and in my opinion, it pays for itself almost immediately. Making sure remote people know where to dial in to for every meeting, every single meeting, even if you're not sure if remote people are going to show up, seems unnecessary. Writing down meeting notes at all or thoroughly enough that someone who can't make a meeting can catch up is a chore. It's intense, and nobody wants to do it. But exposing source control and server access securely outside the physical local office network is a nightmare. But it immediately pays off. It pays off in people who are unable to come into the office but are otherwise free to do work. Like someone broke a leg. That doesn't prevent them from doing like an office job. It might be a pain for them to travel for an hour with a broken leg, but they can sit at home and like answer emails, answer calls, do coding, do design. There's no reason why a broken ankle or something like that requires people to take sick days for weeks. They could have a sick kid that, they just need to be home in case something goes really bad, but otherwise the kid's asleep or whatever. They could have a plumbing emergency. They could be expecting a delivery. There's no reason, like previously people would have to take personal time, would have to take sick days. There's no need for the majority of these, like the majority of reasons why people take sick time or personal time unexpectedly. Can be handled by like just I'm going to work from home today, or just I'm going to work from home for half a day and then come in on the lunch break. On-site employees will appreciate the work from home policy. It'll let them say I'm going to work from home every Friday. Like there's no meetings that I'm in that are crucial on Fridays, so I'm going to be working from home every Friday and spending time with my kids, like saving that hour or two and just spending time with the family. And I've been saying this for a while now. A team where you can't work from home is a team that's working suboptimally. And situations in which you can't be productive at today's jobs have shrunk in number. A small fraction of people that are remote can be disconcerting and annoying, but it can also work if people choose so. Another question that I get a lot is, can you go all remote? Can you have a successful company that doesn't have an office at all? And the answer is absolutely yes. One of my favorite examples, and one of the only companies that I'm going to mention today, is Sked, Sked.com. It's a company that I worked at very, very briefly, but the small like two-person company that I joined, they had this whole remote idea of just being fully remote and not having an office because it's an internet company. Why would you have an office? Today, they're a successful service product company of over 10 people, and they to this day have never had an office. They meet up every quarter. We're somewhere in the world. They meet up in Japan, they meet up in Europe, they meet up in Asia, they meet up in South America. But otherwise, 10 people, developers, designers, support staff, marketing staff, they all work remotely. They work from home from various parts of the world. And the founder has been traveling continuously for over 2 years now. So he just travels the world and then people join him for a week or two, and then they all go home and so on. There are multiple companies like this in the world. I think Toggle is one of them. I'm not sure if Buffer is. I think it is. There are many companies who are doing the all remote thing, and it seems to be working. So in the example of Sked, like they directly funnel the price of an office and the price of local workforce into flying people around the world 3 to 4 times a year. And it's an absolutely amazing story. So in conclusion, from my experience, working remotely is awesome. Remote workers are awesome. Give it a shot. It might just change your life. Thank you. Questions? Wow, okay. Let's see if there's... How do I? No questions online. Wow. Okay. Yeah. Shoot. I'll repeat the question. You say the question, I'll repeat it. From whose perspective? From the worker perspective, okay. Disadvantages.
Repeat the question.
Yeah. So, are there any disadvantages to working remotely as the worker? I don't see any, because of all of the things that I listed. So, if you're not a good communicator, if you're not a person who can just start talking and just talk until other people start talking back, you might feel isolated. You might feel alone. Some people truly enjoy the company of people in the office. There are some offices that are great. There are some offices that are just full of people you don't really like. Some people really can't be alone. I'm perfectly fine being alone all day. I go out and I meet people that I choose. I can't really see any, like, if you live with people that cannot be that don't understand the remote work, that think, oh, you're at home, you're just screwing around, you're not doing anything important, I can interrupt you all the time. It's going to be very difficult to get work done, and then you're going to be making up for it at hours when they're asleep. If you yourself can't, like, there's people who can't make themselves work. So when I was at DeviantArt for the first 2 years, I just worked all the time. If I was at home, I was working. If I went to the kitchen to make myself food, I would drag the laptop with me, and I was always trying to catch up, until I found a mode where I could say, okay, this needs to happen today, and then I get it done. I really can't say that there's things that I miss from the office. There's things that I feel I'm missing out on. I really can't say that any of that is. It very much depends on who you work for. I value myself as a professional. I insist on being treated fairly. I insist on being paid a lot of money. I don't see, there's nobody in Croatia that could offer me what I have now. So, like, today's a work day. I didn't have to tell anyone that I would be doing this. If I wanted to spend an entire day at the conference, I could have just put it on my calendar and said, out of office doing a talk, and that's just it, because I have flex time, because they know that I will deliver everything that needed to be delivered and that needs to be delivered by the end of the day. And I did all of my work up front, and I'm free today. I didn't even have to ask anyone. I didn't have to tell anyone. I'm trying really hard to think of something that I'm missing out on, or something that is a real difficult challenge. Get a good laptop, get a good internet connection, train the people in your house to respect when you're working, set clear expectations of when you'll be working and when you'll be available for other stuff, and just enjoy it. And then when you want to go move to the coast for 3 months, or want to go travel for 3 months, go and do that.
What's your experience with junior developers and junior people working from home? I mean, you are not the junior, obviously, but for others.
Yeah, that's a great question. Let me start off even lower than that. I think it would be very difficult to have remote interns. My current company uses interns extensively. We have exchange programs with a lot of schools, even schools in Zagreb. Interns fly out to New York and spend 3 months there working. It would be very, very, very difficult to do that outside of an office environment. Even when the company was in the middle of moving, interns were just completely lost in that. Junior developers would certainly be a bigger time sink and be less productive initially. I don't think there's a way around that. I don't think seniors are people that you can just throw into the deep end and they'll figure it out. Juniors are people that need to be shown things. What my company does is they insist on remote people who are starting out to fly out for They wanted me to fly out for 3 months. I negotiated down to like 6 weeks or something like that. But they insist on an initial on-site period for spinning you up, for like just getting through the stupid, here's how you check out our code, here's how you build our code, here's how you contribute, here's who the various contributors are that you can reach out to, forming a relationship with everyone in the team, and then you can go and like see you once a quarter for a week. DeviantArt didn't have that. DeviantArt hired me through Skype, and I quit through Skype, and I saw them for a total of 10 weeks in a 3-year period. But what they did was, it was a 100-person company. There was a team, it was called Reactor, and all they did was fix bugs. And that team would be between 2 and 10 developers at any given time. So if your project finished, you would end up in Reactor. If you joined the company, you would end up in Reactor. And all they did was fix tiny bugs or bigger bugs for 2 months or so to get acquainted with the code base in a way that didn't affect, like, there was a guy who was running Reactor and his sole job was fielding stupid questions. And there was no expectation that he would get any work done because he was managing the new kids. But that setup allowed the company to spin people up without like expecting them, oh, he's a junior, he's going to join this critical project, and we need him to be 100% in 2 months. DeviantArt also aggressively had a trial period and aggressively cut people because of that trial period. So when you joined, there was an explicit 2 or 3 month trial. You got full pay, but at the end of the 2 or 3 months, I don't even remember anymore, there was a conversation with your boss and his boss, like the chief of development and the CTO, and they were like, this is what works, this is what doesn't work, and they vote to keep you. By default, you're out. And I saw like 15 people hired in the 3 years that I was there. I saw 3 people get cut because there was a call to not keep them on. And I saw 2 people quit before they could be fired because they realized that they weren't up to the task. But yes, that's a good question. Junior developers or junior staff in any position is something to keep in mind. It's not the same thing. Yeah. Can you repeat?
In hybrid environment, lots of decisions are made on around water cooler, for example. And so, how would you influence that kind of setting where you're kind of left out just because you're remote and you cannot like chat freely with people and influence them?
It's a struggle. It's difficult. For me, it comes down to my character, where I feel perfectly comfortable saying, "Hey, why wasn't I included in this?" Like I said in my talk, the entire company needs to be on board. And yes, some things will just happen by the water cooler, but also some things will happen in private chats. I have about 10 private chats open at all times with people in the company, and we discuss things that nobody ever sees, and we act on those things. So yes, it's a problem if you're the only person. So being the only remote person in a 100-person company is a lonely gig. It sucks. It blows. Nobody's ever going to bother setting up a teleconference link. Nobody's going to tell you that a meeting is happening. They're just going to go into a room and like. But if there's a balance, it starts to even out, and people get it. When I joined the current company, I was definitely like, I was the first person to go fully remote. That was new, and I got left out of a bunch of things. And every single time, I would be like, "Hey, where do I dial in? Who's organizing this meeting?" Luckily, my company does everything through. So we're all on. There's a Google Apps account for like the entire domain, and you can see everyone's calendar. You can see where they are, and we use this to book meeting rooms. So there's 8 meeting rooms. You can't be in a meeting room that you haven't booked, and to book a meeting room, you have to put a calendar event on your calendar. So you can see where people are. You can see who else is in that meeting. You can message all of them and say, "Hey, where do I dial in?" It's definitely a problem, but when I joined this company, it happened, I don't know, 6 times in the first couple of months, and it hasn't happened in, I don't know, in the last year. It happened once. It's an education thing. You have to slowly build up that relationship. Okay, thank you.
Thank you, Luka.